All right, so this time you've given us something really interesting. It's like right out of a movie, a classic art heist. We're doing a deep dive into the case of the Aurora Diamond.
Oh, this is going to be good.
It's a big one. Think like grand gala-packed museum, and then poof, the diamond's gone.
Just like that.
We've got the scene set, so let's meet our suspects, shall we?
All right, lay it on me.
First up, the curator. They've been acting pretty nervous ever since the diamond vanished. And get this, they're dealing with some pretty serious financial problems. Makes you wonder, right?
Yeah, that's definitely suspicious. Money trouble is a huge factor in a lot of art heists.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Big time. Like, studies have shown that when people are under intense financial strain, they sometimes start taking more risks. They're more willing to, cross those ethical boundaries. It's not like a direct link to criminal activity, but it's definitely a red flag that investigators would want to look into.
Okay, so it's not just about the motive itself, but like how that motive might actually play out in someone's actions.
Exactly. You got to look at the whole picture.
Yeah. So we've got the curator with a possible reason, but then there's this guest. This guest is like dripping in diamonds, clearly wealthy. And get this, they've been spotted at a few other events where valuable stuff has gone missing.
Interesting.
Coincidence? I don't know.
That's what we're here to find out, right? This brings up the whole concept of prior bad acts in criminal investigations.
Prior bad acts. So.
Yeah, basically it means investigators can't just profile someone based on their past, but they do look for patterns of behavior.
That makes sense.
So the question here isn't just, were they at those other events, but what were they doing there, and was there any evidence linking them to those other thefts?
Okay, so we're not jumping to conclusions, but we're not ignoring a potential pattern either.
Yeah.
This is where things get kind of tricky. How much weight do you give to past behavior when you're trying to solve a current crime?
It's a tough one. You have to strike a balance. Investigators need to be aware of their own biases and not make assumptions just because someone's been in trouble before. So just because this guest was at those other events doesn't automatically make them guilty, but it does mean we need to take a closer look.
Agreed. Okay, so we've got a potentially desperate curator and a guest with a maybe shady past. But wait, there's one more person we got to consider. The waiter. Now, they seem pretty calm and collected throughout this whole thing.
Oh.
But here's the thing. They had access to the museum's security system.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah, and access to security systems is often like a key element in these big art heists.
For sure. Think about it. You can disable alarms, create blind spots, even manipulate footage. It's a game changer for someone who wants to steal something valuable.
And it's not like it's something out of a movie where you just hack in with a few keystrokes.
No way. These systems can be incredibly complex.
So our waiter would need to have some serious tech skills to pull this off. Or maybe they had help an accomplice with the know-how. This is getting complicated, but let's just back up for a second before we go too deep into the technical stuff. What are the most basic things investigators would be looking for in a case like this?
Well, the first thing is to establish a timeline of events, like what happened when. And then they have to carefully analyze each piece of evidence within that timeline.
Like a puzzle.
Exactly. They'd be asking questions like, who had access to the diamond? What were the security protocols in place? Were there any witnesses? And probably most importantly, what physical evidence was left behind.
When you say physical evidence, I always think of those scenes in crime shows where they're dusting for fingerprints. That's still a big thing, or is it all high tech now?
Well, fingerprints are still important. But yeah, technology has definitely changed the game. We're talking DNA analysis, trace fibers, even digital forensics if there's a cyber angle.
They have way more tools in their arsenal.
Exactly. It's about putting the pieces together using everything they can get their hands on.
Speaking of putting things together, you told us about the gala itself. It was packed. Tons of people. Music, champagne. Doesn't that make it harder for investigators? I mean, how can you even track someone in that kind of chaos?
Crowd dynamics are a huge challenge in these kinds of cases. That's why eyewitness testimony can be so unreliable. People's perceptions get skewed in a crowded, stimulating environment.
Right. It's like sensory overload.
Exactly. So investigators would be looking for any security footage from that night, trying to map out everyone's movements, especially our suspects.
So the thief could have used that chaos to their advantage? Just blend in, wait for the right moment, and make their move.
Exactly. Criminals often take advantage of those kinds of vulnerabilities. They know that when there's a lot going on, people aren't paying as much attention. It's the perfect opportunity to slip away unnoticed.
It's like a magic trick misdirection.
Precisely.
This makes me think about the curator again.
Yeah.
They were supposed to be watching over the exhibits, right? Maybe they just snuck away when things were really busy, smashed the case, and pocketed the diamond. Desperate times, desperate measures.
It's a possibility. And if they did use force to get into the case, that could point to a more impulsive act, which would fit with the idea that they were acting out of desperation.
But wouldn't someone have seen them? Smashing a display case in a crowded museum, even with all the commotion.
You'd think so, but you'd be surprised how easy it is for distractions to hide things. Even something pretty obvious. Like, it all comes down to timing and how people perceive things.
Okay, I see your point.
Mm-hmm.
What about the guest? They said they were on an important phone call the whole time. Could that be their alibi?
An alibi is important, but it's not a guarantee. Investigators would want to double-check that story, like look at phone records, see if there's any proof that a call was actually made at that time. They might even try to contact the person they claim to be talking to.
So you're saying even a seemingly solid alibi can fall apart if you look closely enough?
Absolutely. It's all about verification.
Okay, what about the display case itself? How did they actually get in? Wouldn't that tell us something about who did it?
Absolutely. The method of entry can be super revealing. Was it forced open? Were there signs of tampering? Did it require special tools or knowledge? Those answers could help us narrow down our list of suspects.
If it was just brute force, maybe that points to the curator acting without thinking. But if it was something more sophisticated that needed technical skills or inside knowledge, that could make us look more closely at the waiter, or even the guest, if they planned this out.
Exactly. And that's why forensic analysis of the display case is so important. Fingerprints, tool marks, any trace evidence left behind. All of that could give us valuable clues about how the theft happened and who is responsible.
So we've got motive, opportunity, and now we're starting to get an idea of the method. It feels like we're getting closer to figuring this out. But I still feel like we're missing something. What else do investigators look for that might not be so obvious?
One thing they always watch out for is inconsistencies. Like, do the suspects' stories match up with the evidence? Are there holes in their alibis? Do they say one thing but do another? Sometimes the smallest difference can be the key to solving the whole thing.
So it's not just about the big obvious clues. It's about paying attention to the little things. The stuff that doesn't quite add up. It's like they say the devil's in the details.
Exactly. And sometimes those details are hidden in plain sight. A comment that seems innocent, a nervous habit, an object that's out of place. Those can all be red flags for a good investigator.
This makes me think about the waiter again. We know they had access to the security system. But what if they had access to something else? Something that gave them an advantage in this heist?
That's a great point. Investigators would want to look into their background, their work history, any connections they might have to the museum or the people who work there. They'd also be interested in any special skills or knowledge the waiter has that could have helped them with the theft.
So it's not just about what we know about them now, but also about digging into their past, looking for anything that could connect them to the crime or give them a reason to steal the Aurora diamond in particular.
Exactly. Everyone has a story, a web of relationships and experiences that make them who they are. It's the investigator's job to untangle that web and see if it leads them to the truth.
Okay, I'm ready for the answer. Who stole the Aurora diamond? Well, we've looked at their motives, we've checked their alibis, we've even talked about what might be going on in their heads. Is there anything that really stands out to you? Like a clue that could help us solve this?
Let's go back to that security footage. We talked about how it can be really helpful for investigators, but it can also be risky for criminals. Sometimes they think they've covered their tracks, but the camera catches something they missed.
So you're saying our thief might have made a mistake, and the cameras caught it?
Exactly. Remember how we talked about the waiter using that tray of champagne glasses?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it seems they weren't as sneaky as they thought. The footage shows them pretty clearly taking the Aurora diamond while they're moving through the crowd.
Wow. They used the tray as cover. That's pretty bold, but also kind of smart. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, how criminals use distractions in crowds to their advantage.
It was a risky move, and it almost worked. It just goes to show how important it is for investigators to be really thorough. If they hadn't looked at every single frame of that footage, they might have missed that crucial detail.
So what happened then? Did the waiter confess when they saw the footage?
They did. It turns out they were in a lot of debt, and they saw the Aurora diamond as a way to fix their financial problems.
It's a familiar story, isn't it? The temptation of easy money, the pressure of owing people money, the belief that you can outsmart everyone. But as we've seen, the truth always comes out in the end.
And a lot of times it comes down to the hard work of investigators. They're the ones who can see the patterns, connect the dots, and find the evidence that other people miss.
This case has been really interesting. It reminds us that even situations that seem simple can have hidden twists and turns.
Absolutely. It shows the power of observation and deduction and how important it is to never ignore those little details.
So what's the takeaway for our listener? The one who gave us this mystery to solve. What's something they can think about?
I'd say to think about all the different sides of a criminal investigation. It's not just about catching the criminal. It's about understanding why they did it, how they did it, and all the things that led up to it.
It's about looking deeper, questioning what you think you know, and enjoying the challenge of solving a complicated puzzle.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe this deep dive has sparked an interest in forensics or criminal psychology, or maybe it's just made them more aware of the clues that are all around us.
Well, it's been great working on this case with you. Until next time, everyone, stay curious, stay sharp, and keep those detective skills ready. You never know when you might need them.